Welcome to Brewsers, a podcast about beer, coffee, booze, and bruisers. I am your host, Rody John, and today we speak to Royce Issacs. We touch on his love of pro wrestling, what he's learned from Tom Lawler, and so much more. I loved this interview, and we did this right before Battle in the Valley, and you saw him perform like a crazy man that night, and you're going to see so much more from him in the future, and I can't wait to see it. Speaking of things you want to go check out and see, make sure to sign up for our newsletter. It comes out twice a week. You get even more information about our guests. You get fun facts, and you get to find out what's happening with your favorite podcast, all about beer, coffee, booze, and bruisers. So without further ado, here is Royce Issacs. I would like to welcome to the show Royce Issacs. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing wonderful. It's chilly for Los Angeles today, but we got the sun out. I'm hanging out. I'm ready for some wrestling this weekend.
There you go. Well, yeah, so for people who don't who are listening, kind of paint us a word picture. Where are you at? What's going on around you?
Yeah, man. I had last couple of weeks off for the holidays and everything like that, but gearing up for a big 2024. I have Jeff Cobb on Friday here. I'm going to be wrestling, and then Saturday in the New Japan. Yeah, it'll be I'm gonna pack a lunch for that one, but I'm ready for it. And Saturday is the Battle in the Valley, New Japan pay-per-view. Got a 6-man with my Patriots from Team Filthy Tom and Jarrell Nelson. And we're taking on a eclectic, but our team, Fred Rosser, Jacob Fox, who's making his debut in New Japan, and Shota Umino. So it should be a worthy challenge, sure.
So you've got Jeff Cobb Friday and then Jacob Fatu Saturday?
Yeah, absolutely.
Those are some
So, there's some hosses, but you know what? I'm a hoss too, so that's what I like. I like, as Big E says, big meaty men slapping me. So.
I miss him every day. I really hope.
Indeed.
I don't know why they didn't put him on like commentary or put him, backstage interview person. I don't know. We could probably talk about Big E all day, but we're not going to.
For sure.
Well, I want to talk about big meat slapping, but let's go all the way back in time. What is your earliest memory of pro wrestling?
I think my earliest memory of pro wrestling is probably hanging out with my dad on the couch, watching, Monday Night Raw, like Attitude Era, Stone Cold and Rock, and, little me just seeing it and being amazed and thinking, wow, that's, like, what a spectacle. At the time, of course, I never thought I would actually become a wrestler, but it's kind of just, it's always had a hold on me. And, yeah, like those are some of my best memories. It's been really cool now as an active wrestler because my dad is really into my career and he follows me, and he actually gets out to some of my matches occasionally and stuff like that. He's my biggest supporter, so it's really, really awesome.
That is so cool. Now, let's go forward a little bit. Well, actually, no, let's stay when you were a kid. What did you want to be when you grew up when you were a kid? I'm
not sure if I had any realistic goals. I think I wanted to be a samurai or something, but that was probably 300 years and at least, and a different continent away. But going through high school and college, I thought to maybe being like a teacher or a coach, and I always did have like wrestling somewhere in the back of my mind. I just didn't. I didn't necessarily see like, oh, maybe this could become my job one day until I started training later. And then it was like, oh, yeah, I need to make this thing.
Yeah, it is funny when you're a kid and you don't really obviously know how business works in general, let alone the business of pro wrestling. And then you get a little older and you feel like you have some kind of an idea as to like how they get paid, but you can, it especially depends on where you grew up. Like I was growing up, WCW and WWF at the time were the thing. And then like obviously ECW was there as well. And then later I grew to learn about, Mexico, Japan, England, and all those other places that are
hotbeds for pro wrestling, but you don't think that, well, they probably, that's their living, or, they probably get paid so much money doing that. And then you grow up a little more and you figure out more is like, oh, so if I really grind, I really could make this a viable job for myself. And then, obviously the goal at some point for some wrestlers, depending on who you are, is to work for one of the biggest companies. So that way, you have somewhat of not an anchor, but like stability really. And then, but again, back to when you were a kid, there's these larger than life, people on your TV, or if you're lucky enough to go to a live show, they're even, bigger than you imagine. And you just have no idea how are they even getting paid? Like, how is that a job? Like, how is that even a thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was kind of my mindset at the time, and it wasn't until coming out of college and I'm done with my like athletic sports career or so, I think at the time, but I always did enjoy competing. And so a few years in the real world doing real jobs, and I was like, this is fine, but it wasn't really for me, wearing pants and making sales calls and all this stuff. And that's when wrestling came back into my life, and I was like, oh yeah, this spandex and making towns, that is for me.
Yeah. Boots and panties and play fighting, give me that all day.
Yeah.
Well, so then, I mean, since you realized that that's where you wanted to be, how did you make that transition to, all right, I need to find a school, train, and then go from there? Like, so where did you learn to train at?
So I'd had this idea in the back of my mind, that this like voice that kept kind of talking to me, like, hey, you should try wrestling, maybe you should do this. And I was at the time, I looked up some places. I was living in Denver, and I looked up some places to train, but I couldn't find anything online at the time. Like, the websites weren't very good. Nothing seemed to be very active. So I was actually thinking of maybe like moving out of state or something and just giving it a go. And then one of my friends found a local Denver indie that's still going now. It's actually where I'm performing on Friday, Lucha Libre and Laugh. And I went to the show, and honestly, the wrestling at the time, they were very new. It wasn't very good, but the show, there was something about it. It was just like, it was like magnetizing, and I was really just like into it. So I talked to the promoter afterwards. He told me where I needed to go and who I needed to talk to. And so I started training the next week at this place called the Butcher Shop. My trainer at the time, he doesn't train people anymore, but his name's Lonnie Valdez. He's like a Denver, he's been wrestling for probably over 20 years at this point. But, Denver local, really athletic, really solid fundamentals. And he started showing me the ropes, and pretty immediately I was like, oh wow, okay, like this is really something that connects with me. This is something I want to do, and started performing on shows and taking it on the road a little bit.
That's awesome. Now, when you finally started getting on the road, how quickly, I guess, did you become accustomed to traveling and what you do need to bring as opposed to you don't need to bring?
Like,
well, I guess like when it comes to, obviously gear wise and everything, but then also, when it comes to traveling, you're on your own when it comes to food, because, you're working most shows, and no offense to a lot of promoters, but they don't feed the boys or girls. So like, how did that was it kind of a trial by fire, or did you kind of already know ahead of time?
No, yeah, definitely. I think you just kind of figure out what you can get on the road that's still relatively healthy and good nutrition and a lot of, this protein bar is pretty good. I can, once Gatorade Zero came out, that became a game changer for sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, just like a little bit of trial and error for sure. But the good thing is, my college degree is in kinesiology, so I had a decent idea of nutrition and whatnot. So I came into the business not nearly as muscular as I am now, but I had a decent base from I was college wrestler and football player, a Division III. I did both sports, lettered in both, and so like I knew how to work out. I knew how to eat somewhat. I think I've added to my knowledge quite a bit since then, but I had a decent base, so I think that did help me out, kind of give me a step ahead of a lot of people. But it was still definitely trial and error and figuring out, okay, definitely don't eat this before a match because it's going to sit in my stomach forever. Okay, this is good carbs, whatever, all that kind of stuff. I figured it out pretty quick, though.
That's good. Yeah, I know there's obviously you got to figure it out as you're going, but I'm glad that you realized that pretty quickly. It's like, okay, maybe don't eat this before I actually go into the ring. Afterwards, perfectly okay. Before, not so much.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, when did you first wrestle outside of America? Because I know, obviously, wrestling inside, some people stay in their own state for a long time, which, I think is almost a detriment because you only can grow so much wrestling kind of the same people. Obviously you get people coming in through other states, but, once you start working other states and other cities and you're like, oh, or other even parts of the country, you're like, oh, this crowd is going to be completely different. They're eating this stuff up as opposed to when I'm at home, they're not eating this up as much. But then you go outside of America and you're like, whoa, okay, well, this is a completely different animal. When did you start wrestling outside of America?
I think I was fairly lucky in that even though my trainer was not super well traveled, he stressed the importance of it very early.
Mm-hmm.
And something about it resonated with me, and I felt like, oh yeah, the guys that are successful seem to travel quite a bit, so I need to figure out how to get into cars and get myself out there and meet people and wrestle different people. I do think in addition to what you were saying about you tend to wrestle the same people when you stay locally is also wrestling in front of different crowds and realizing, okay, not every crowd responds the same way to everything.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you're a hometown hero and everyone loves you there, but that's because they've seen you 100 times. How do you escape, the crowd, set like the crowd making sound, but in front of a crowd that maybe has never seen you before, or, maybe they're used to a certain style of wrestling and not what you necessarily do. So luckily I struck out as far as traveling pretty early, and then my first international, I did just one small show in Winnipeg when I was maybe 6 months into wrestling, like on shows. And then after that, I didn't travel internationally again until the end of 2016 is when I got my first tour with DDT. I'd been working at least like regionally in the Southwest, obviously Colorado, and like a little bit in the Midwest, like Nebraska. And I did a few shows in like Utah, and then started going over in Vegas quite a bit for Future Stars of Wrestling and Paragon Pro Wrestling, and that's where I kind of made the connections that allowed the DDT connection. And it's been a long journey since then still, but like the DDT tours definitely really helped me develop as a wrestler and figure out who Royce Issacs is. And I got to train over in Japan quite a bit, which I think also really helped up my level because they have some of the best trainers. I think training with another really like a lot of high level people. When you look at the people that were at DDT at the time, a lot of those guys are now like the top guys. Like a lot of the guys I was training with now are the top guys there. So it was really high quality stuff with some really young, hungry, and talented guys.
Yeah, DDT is one of those companies that I almost feel like they get lumped a lot with the comedy aspect of it, where there obviously is some comedy to that. But like you said, their stars now are legit wrestlers. People forget that Kenny Omega and Kota Ibushi came out of there as well. So like, they're not complete comedy acts over there, but there is a larger aspect